The rain had been falling for hours, drumming against the windows with an insistence that felt almost personal, as if the storm itself had been waiting for this moment just as long as Ethan Miller had. It was nearly midnight when he stepped into the kitchen, soaked from the walk he took just to clear his head, though nothing about the cold, misty air outside had brought clarity. Instead, it only sharpened the ache in his chest. He placed the sealed manila envelope gently on the kitchen table. Not slammed, not tossed, just placed, as if the weight inside could shatter if handled too roughly. But the truth didn't break that easily. People did. Claire stood near the sink, her fingers gripping the counter so tightly her knuckles were pale. Still wearing her light blue sweater from work, she looked like the same woman he'd loved for 8 years. Soft-spoken, generous, dependable. But tonight, something in her eyes was different. There was fear. The unmistakable kind that comes from knowing exactly what you've done and exactly what's coming. "You're scaring me," Claire whispered, though her voice trembled as if it were she who frightened herself. Ethan didn't answer. He simply nudged the envelope closer to her with 2 fingers, his face unreadable beneath the dim overhead light. He'd practiced what he might say, angry words, questions, accusations. And yet now that the moment was here, every sentence died before reaching his tongue. Claire glanced at the envelope the way someone looks at a wild animal, certain it would bite if she moved too quickly. "Ethan, whatever you think, whatever this is, it's not what you believe." She swallowed hard. It was just a mistake. The words hit the air like a fragile excuse tossed toward a rising wave. Ethan's jaw tightened, but still he said nothing. The only sounds in the room were the hum of the refrigerator and the rain rattling against the glass. His silence had always unsettled Claire more than anger ever could. It left her no room to defend, no space to reshape the narrative. "Please," she whispered, stepping closer. "You're not even giving me a chance to explain." He finally looked up, and for the first time in weeks, he let her see the rawness in his eyes. Not fury, not resentment, something much heavier. "Then open it." Just 3 words, but they seemed to pull the oxygen from the room. Claire hesitated, her breath catching. She reached the table, her hands shaking as she brushed the envelope's edge. Her fingers lingered there as if touching the truth itself might burn her. Ethan watched her closely, though his expression remained still. He wasn't here to scream. He wasn't here to punish. He wanted the truth spoken from her own lips. The envelope was only the mirror. She would be the confession. Outside, thunder rolled, long and low. Claire finally lifted the envelope, turning it in her hands. "Where did you even get this?" she murmured, voice barely audible. Silence. "Ethan, look at me, please." But he didn't. He kept his gaze fixed on the envelope, a quiet challenge. She knew what was inside. He knew she knew. This wasn't a discovery for her, it was a reckoning. I didn't mean for any of it to happen," her voice cracked. "You have to believe me. I made one stupid choice and I regretted it instantly. I tried to fix things, I did, but everything kept spiraling." Rainwater dripped from Ethan's sleeve, collecting in a small puddle on the floor. He still hadn't changed out of the jacket he'd worn during his walk. He looked tired, carved out, as though the storm outside had made its way inside him long before he stepped back through the door. Claire held her breath, then slowly slid her thumb under the flap of the envelope. The sound, paper ripping softly, cut through the kitchen with a sharpness that made both of them tense. She pulled out the first photograph. Her face went white. It was enough to confirm everything. The hotel hallway, the blurred reflection in the elevator mirror, the date stamped at the bottom. 2 weeks ago. More photos followed, screenshots of bank statements, snippets of text messages she thought she had deleted permanently. A receipt from a restaurant neither she nor Ethan had ever gone to, but he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Claire sank into the nearest chair, a hand covering her mouth as her breath came uneven and shallow. "Oh God, Ethan." Finally he spoke, but his voice was soft, hollow. "You said it was just a mistake." Her shoulders shook. "It was," she said, choking on the words. "It was one mistake, I swear." "One?" His voice was still calm, but something inside the word cut deeper than anger could. "Claire, this isn't one night. This is weeks. Maybe months." Claire squeezed her eyes shut, tears finally spilling. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to go so far. Ethan leaned back, his gaze dropping to the pile of evidence between them. He remembered every moment he'd uncovered each piece, how his stomach twisted, how denial fought with the truth until it couldn't anymore. But none of that compared to the ache in the room now. You could have told me, he murmured, before it became this. She shook her head helplessly. I was scared. Of losing me? Ethan asked. Claire hesitated, and that hesitation was enough to wound him more deeply than any photo ever could. No, she finally whispered. I was scared of losing the version of myself you thought I was. Another clap of thunder echoed through the kitchen. Ethan looked at her long and hard, at the woman he loved, the woman he no longer recognized. And in the dim light reflected off the storm outside, he realized something he'd been avoiding for weeks. This moment wasn't about proof. It was about the truth that came after. He stood up slowly. Claire looked up in alarm. Ethan, where are you going? But he didn't answer. Not yet. He needed air, space, distance from the wreckage now, sitting between them. He paused at the doorway, his voice steady but unsteady all at once. When you're ready, he said softly, tell me everything. He didn't look back as he walked away, and Claire, sitting alone with her own betrayal laid bare before her, realized the truth was no longer something she could hide from. It was already here, and now she had to face it. Seattle had always been a place Ethan loved for its contradictions. The calm gray skies and the restless undercurrent of ambition. The quiet neighborhoods contrasted with downtown's relentless hum. When he and Claire bought their modest, cedar-trimmed house near Green Lake 5 years earlier, it felt like the beginning of everything they'd hoped for. A future, stability, a home that smelled of fresh paint, morning coffee, and the faint perfume Claire wore to work. Back then, their routines felt comforting. Ethan would bike to his job at a mid-sized software company in South Lake Union, and Claire would leave for the high school where she taught English. Evenings were slow, cooking together, watching shows, sharing small stories from their day. A simple life, but for a long time, it was enough. But life in modern America had a way of eroding things, not with earthquakes, but with friction, quiet, constant, unnoticed until it was too late. The first shifts were subtle. Ethan began taking on extra hours during a major product launch. Claire attended more faculty meetings, after-school tutoring, weekend workshops. They still shared a bed, still shared a kitchen, still shared plans, but the in-between moments, the connective tissue of a relationship, started thinning. It was the technology that filled the silence first. Ethan immersed himself in late-night debugging sessions, the glow of his monitor replacing conversation. Claire scrolled TikTok and Instagram until midnight. They stopped talking about their dreams, their fears, even their daily annoyances. In a city full of noise, they lived in a home where no one spoke. The canyon wasn't created in a single moment. It deepened one ignored touch at a time, one missed glance, one distracted instead of a listening ear. Still, Ethan believed they were okay. Busy maybe, stressed, but okay, until the pieces no longer fit. It started one Tuesday evening. Claire came home unusually late, 10:40 p.m., with her hair slightly disheveled and her makeup a little smudged. She claimed a staff dinner. He believed her, or forced himself to. Then came the phone. She used to leave it charging openly on the counter. Now it was always with her, even brought into the shower, placed face down at dinner, carried from room to room. Notifications were suddenly silenced. The lock screen no longer lit up. She changed her passcode without mentioning it. Ethan noticed each detail the way a man notices cracks in a dam. Small at first, but ominous. Long day? He'd ask gently when she rushed past him. Exhausting, she'd answer, hugging him briefly, before disappearing upstairs. No elaboration, no warmth, just exhaustion. Soon after, Claire began wearing new clothes, subtle but different, more fitted dresses, a new shade of lipstick. He complimented her one evening, hoping to reconnect. You look great, he said, trying to sound sincere, not suspicious. Her response was a quiet, thanks, followed by a quick retreat to the bedroom, the door locking behind her. But the first real fracture came from a single sentence. One Friday morning, as Ethan packed his laptop, Claire told him she'd be late again. "We're finalizing the literature curriculum. Might run past 9, she said. He kissed her cheek goodbye. But that night, around 8:30, he passed by her car while walking home from the grocery store. He froze. Her car wasn't at the school. It was parked behind a dim restaurant 3 blocks away. He told himself there could be a reason, maybe a last-minute dinner with coworkers, but something inside him twisted. Still, he walked home without confronting her. He didn't feel ready for the truth. Not then. But the next morning, while emptying the trash, he noticed a crumpled receipt from that same restaurant. 2 entrees, 2 cocktails. No item that resembled Claire's usual food preferences. No indication of it being a group gathering. Everything in him wanted to be wrong. He didn't say a word. Instead, the quiet gathering began. Not spying, not snooping, just documenting the inconsistencies. It felt strange, like betraying his own values. But he couldn't ignore the hollow ringing in his chest, the instinct whispering that something was slipping out of his reach. He searched their shared phone plan logs, not reading messages, just checking activity. Dates lined up too neatly with her late nights. Calls were short but frequent. He checked credit card statements, hotel bar charges, a rideshare trip from a place she'd never mentioned visiting. He screenshotted, printed, clipped each piece in silence. And with each piece, he felt a little more of himself come undone. Some nights he lay awake, replaying every memory of their marriage. The first road trip to Mount Rainier, lazy Sunday mornings, fighting over furniture at IKEA. The Christmas they couldn't afford gifts but laughed through the disappointment. He couldn't reconcile those moments with the growing shadow Claire brought home each night. Was the distance his fault? Did working late push her away? Did he stop being present? Did she? One evening he found her crying quietly in the shower. He knocked softly. "Claire, are you okay?" "Just tired," she said, wiping her eyes too quickly. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Neither of them were. Their home echoed with everything left unsaid. It wasn't just the suspicion that tortured him. It was the knowing that somehow he might have contributed through neglect, distraction, or simply assuming love would survive on autopilot. He didn't want to catch her. He wanted to reach her. But every attempt to reconnect felt like trying to hug smoke. Then came the real confirmation. One Thursday night, she left her laptop open on the dining table while rushing to answer a phone call outside. The screen dimmed but didn't lock. A notification popped up on the corner, a name Ethan didn't recognize. The preview message was short, too tender, too intimate. His stomach dropped. He didn't click. He didn't open anything. But the truth had slipped through the cracks regardless. That was the night he printed the first piece of evidence and put it in the envelope. The night he admitted to himself that pretending wouldn't save them. He didn't confront her yet, not with anger, not with tears. He waited, 3 weeks of quiet, torturous waiting, as he collected what he needed, not to destroy her, but to force the truth they both kept running from. And when Claire came home on the night of the storm, dripping water from her hair and claiming another late meeting, Ethan felt something in him settle. He knew the storm outside was nothing compared to the one waiting in their kitchen. He picked up the envelope, and the rest was inevitable. The days following the first undeniable signs of Claire's betrayal felt like moving through a world slightly out of focus. Ethan still went to work, still joined morning stand-ups, still coded and reviewed pull requests, but his mind drifted constantly, slipping back into the quiet terror building inside him. Every notification on his phone tightened his chest. Every moment Claire stepped outside to take a call bruised something fragile in him. The conflict wasn't loud. It wasn't cinematic. It lived in silence, between breaths, inside glances, beneath the weight of routines that no longer fit. One late afternoon at work, Ethan overheard 2 coworkers chatting near the espresso machine. They weren't talking about Claire specifically, nothing that obvious, but one of them mentioned a rumor going around Roosevelt High School about a teacher getting a little too close to a divorced parent. Ethan felt his coffee turn sour in his stomach. He walked away quietly before the rest of the conversation could break him further. Rumors, hotel charges, deleted messages, everything pointed in one direction, and Claire was still lying. The lies hurt more than the evidence, because lies required choice. She began weaving stories with small cracks, details that didn't line up, explanations that sounded rehearsed, smiles too tight at the edges. One evening, Ethan asked casually, "So, how was the curriculum meeting?" Claire froze for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable to anyone else. But to Ethan, it was like watching a glitch in a system he knew intimately. "Oh, long, tedious." She shrugged too quickly. "We argued over book selections. Nothing new." Ethan nodded, though he'd seen a receipt from that night. A bar at a Hyatt by the waterfront. 2 drinks, 1 appetizer. His hands went wide, cold around his water glass. "Everything okay?" Claire asked, sensing something in his posture. He forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." Pretending became its own form of survival. But the more he pretended, the more hollow he felt. He found himself analyzing her, dissecting every gesture the way he'd debug a failing piece of code. When she came home with her hair slightly curled, a style she never wore for him, his heart sank. When she hummed softly while scrolling her phone, he wondered if she was thinking of someone else. When she bought a new dress for work, he fought the urge to check her browsing history. The worst part wasn't the suspicion. It was the moments his mind whispered, "What if she's happy with him?" One Saturday morning, Ethan offered to make breakfast. Pancakes, her favorite. They used to cook together, laughing about his inability to flip pancakes without mangling them. But now she stayed on the opposite side of the kitchen, a careful distance between them. He watched her slice strawberries, her movements rushed, anxious. "Claire," he said quietly. She flinched, and he noticed. "I feel like something's off. Between us." Her knife hovered midair. "Off? What do you mean? You've been distant. I'm just stressed from work." "In the late nights?" She swallowed. "I told you they're meetings." Ethan stared at her, wondering how she managed to lie so easily. Was she terrified? Was she numb? Did she hate him for still believing her? He wanted to ask, "Who is he?" He wanted to ask, "Do you still love me?" But the words stayed trapped behind his teeth, because asking made it real. And Ethan wasn't ready for real yet. He needed proof. He needed time. He needed space to prepare for the fallout that would come like a tidal wave when the truth finally broke loose. That night, as he lay beside her in bed, he listened to the rhythm of her breathing. It used to lull him to sleep. Now it reminded him how close she was physically, yet how far away she felt emotionally. She turned in her sleep, shifting away from him, taking the blanket with her. He didn't pull it back. Instead, he stared at the ceiling, feeling the cold crawl into his bones. His inner conflict began choking him. One side screamed at him to confront her now, to demand answers, to stop torturing himself with silence. The other side whispered that confronting her too soon might push her further away, might turn suspicion into devastation. He needed to be sure. He needed the full truth. One evening, while Claire showered, Ethan found himself staring at her phone on the nightstand. He didn't touch it, didn't try to unlock it, but the fact that he even considered it made him feel sick. Trust didn't disappear in a moment. It rotted slowly. He stepped back, heart pounding, ashamed of the intrusive thoughts swirling inside him. He used to pride himself on respecting her privacy, on believing their relationship didn't need surveillance to survive. But now privacy felt like a prison. The next day, the evidence grew, a strange charge on their joint credit card. The Harborview Hotel. Not a bar, not a restaurant, a room. One night only, past midnight. He screenshot it, jaw tight, hands cold. Later, while doing laundry, he found a faint scent of cologne on her cardigan. Not his. His throat tightened, but he tucked the cardigan neatly in her drawer without comment. Each discovery pressed against his ribs like stones piled inside his chest. Claire still kissed him goodbye in the mornings, still told him to drive safely, still asked if he wanted takeout on Fridays. But none of it felt like her. None of it felt like them. The lies built walls around her, and Ethan was left on the other side, watching the version of his wife he once knew slip away. He noticed the way she texted with her screen angled away, the way she turned her head slightly so her hair fell over her face when she smiled at something on her phone, the way she said someone from work a little too quickly, like she'd practiced the line. By week 3, the emotional weight became unbearable. He began waking up with headaches, chest tightness, Moments where he'd sit in his car at the parking garage and simply breathe until he could function. One coworker asked if he was sleeping enough. He lied. Yeah, just a bit stressed. Funny, he thought. Lies came easier than they used to. One night, as Claire left again, hair curled, dress fitted, perfume stronger than usual, she said, "Don't wait up. The meeting might go late." Ethan stood at the window after she left, watching her car pull away. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, stretching the space between them. He'd reached the point where pretending felt like a betrayal of himself. It was time. Time to gather everything. Time to confront the truth. Time to face what he already knew. But he wasn't ready to lose her. Not yet. And that conflict, between love and truth, denial and survival, was what crushed him most. He closed the curtains slowly, each movement careful, deliberate. Then he picked up the manila envelope from the desk drawer and placed the newest evidence inside. The weight of it felt like the weight of his marriage. Heavy, unavoidable, inevitable. The truth arrived on a Thursday evening, quietly, almost politely, as if it didn't want to interrupt the illusion Ethan had been living in. It didn't come from Claire, or from a dramatic slip-up, or even from the man she was seeing. It came from coincidence, from timing, from a moment so ordinary that its impact felt like a punch Ethan never saw coming. He had left work early that day, a headache pounding behind his eyes. Seattle's winter sky was a muted gray, heavy with the promise of rain. He parked near the school to pick up Claire's car from a maintenance appointment nearby, planning to surprise her at the end of her shift. He hoped, that maybe an unexpected gesture would help bridge the chasm forming between them. He walked past the school courtyard toward the administration building, hands shoved into his jacket pockets. Students were filing out, laughing, shoving each other in that careless teenage way. He almost smiled until he heard Claire's voice. He froze. She was standing beneath a covered walkway, her back partially turned toward him. She wasn't alone. A man stood with her, tall, dark hair speckled with premature gray, dressed in a navy wool coat. He looked familiar. Too familiar. Then it hit Ethan. This was Jason Hale, the divorced father whose name had appeared in a few of the school's PTA emails. His daughter Megan was in Claire's sophomore class. Ethan stayed behind the corner of the brick wall, heart thudding. Claire wasn't smiling, not fully, but she was looking at Jason with a softness Ethan hadn't seen in months, a softness that once belonged to him. Jason stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Are you all right? You seem off today." Claire brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, an automatic gesture she used when she was nervous or trying not to cry. "It's nothing, just a lot going on at home." Jason nodded. "You don't have to talk if you're not ready. I'm here. You know that." Something inside Ethan clenched painfully. Claire looked up at Jason, really looked. Her eyes shimmered, vulnerable in a way Ethan hadn't seen in years. "Thank you," she whispered. And then Jason gently squeezed her hand. It was small, subtle. Not the dramatic kiss or embrace Ethan had dreaded, but the intimacy of it, the familiarity, the wordless understanding shattered something inside him far more violently. He stepped back before either of them could see him. His breath was tight, shallow, almost trembling. He told himself to walk away, but his legs moved on their own, slowly, carefully, toward the parking lot, away from them, away from the truth he wasn't ready to face and yet could no longer deny. In his car, his hands shook as he gripped the steering wheel. It wasn't the physical betrayal that gutted him. It wasn't even the lie. It was the realization that Claire had found in someone else something she no longer sought from him. Presence, attention, emotional refuge. The kind of quiet support he used to give before work and life and exhaustion drowned him. He had failed her, and she had failed him. The canyon between them wasn't created by the affair. It had come long before. But now it had a name, a face, a hand that touched hers gently under a school walkway. That night, Ethan didn't go home right away. He parked his car near Lake Union, staring at the water as the early winter fog crawled along the shoreline. He sat there until darkness swallowed the city and the cold seeped into his bones. He replayed everything, every late night, every excuse, every time she smiled at her phone, every time he stayed silent. The pieces snapped together with devastating clarity. A notification from Claire buzzed on his phone. Around 7:18 p.m., staying late, lots of meetings. Don't wait up. The message sent a cold wave down his spine. Another lie. Smooth, practiced, effortless. Ethan typed nothing back. An hour later, he pulled up the folder on his phone, the one he had been building for weeks. Pictures, statements, screenshots, notes. He stared at the evidence not with anger, but with resignation. And then something shifted, a stillness, a clarity he hadn't felt in months. He realized the envelope sitting at home wasn't a prison for her. It was his way out, his way of facing the truth, his way of reclaiming the pieces of himself he had surrendered to denial. He drove home slowly, the city lights blurring into streaks through the rain-smeared windshield. When he stepped inside the house, the silence greeted him like a familiar ghost. He walked to his desk drawer, pulled out the manila envelope, and placed it on the kitchen table. The overhead light flickered once before humming to life. He stared at the envelope, the weight of it suddenly symbolic, an artifact of a broken marriage, a coffin for the lies, a threshold he was finally ready to cross. By the time Claire walked through the door near midnight, shaking out her umbrella and kicking off her shoes, Ethan was waiting for her. She looked startled. "You're awake?" He didn't answer. Her eyes trailed downward to the envelope sitting between them, neatly placed, impossible to ignore. Her face drained of color. "Ethan," she started, her voice a tangled whisper. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He didn't cry. He simply said, "I saw you today." Claire froze. Her breath hitched. "Where?" "At school." She closed her eyes. Oh, God. And Ethan felt the last thread of denial snap inside him. "Claire," he said quietly, steadily, "it's time. For the truth. For the confrontation. For the end of pretending." The storm he had been holding inside for weeks finally reached its breaking point, not in rage but in clarity. Tonight the truth would come out, whether they wanted it to or not. Claire's fingers tremble as she tears open the envelope. The papers spill out, screenshots, credit card statements, timestamps, parking lot photos. Each one lands like a blow, scattering across the table between them. Her breath catches. A soft, strangled sound escapes her throat. "Ethan, She sinks into the chair, her face collapsing. "I never meant for it to go this far." He doesn't move. He doesn't speak. He just watches. Claire wipes at her eyes, but the tears come too fast. "I was lonely. You were always working, always tired, always somewhere else. And he listened. He paid attention. It felt like someone finally saw me again." Her confession unravels into but Ethan doesn't shout. He doesn't break anything. He simply closes his eyes as if the weight of her words is heavier than anything he has carried. "It wasn't the affair," he finally whispers, voice cracking. "It's that you reached for someone else instead of reaching for me." Claire covers her mouth, guilt twisting every feature. I know. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His chest tightens, not in rage but in grief, a slow burning ache that spreads through every bone. This is the moment everything shatters. Not because she cheated, but because he realizes they both helped build the distance that destroyed them. The climax isn't explosive. It's devastatingly quiet. A heartbreak shared across a kitchen table littered with proof that their marriage had been dying long before either of them noticed. The decision isn't dramatic. No yelling, no slamming doors, just two exhausted people admitting they can't keep bleeding in the same room. They call it a temporary separation, but the word temporary feels fragile, like a promise neither of them can fully believe. He packs lightly, a duffel bag, a laptop, a few shirts, the rest, photos, memories, the weight of the life they built, stays behind. The Airbnb near Lake Union is quiet, almost too quiet. The kind of place where the hum of the refrigerator becomes company and every creak in the floorboards reminds him he's alone. Nights are the worst. He lies awake staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The late nights, the silence at dinner, the missed chances to ask her how she was really feeling. The betrayal hurts, of course it does, But what crushes him more is the realization that he helped create the emptiness she tried to fill. He wanders the waterfront in the evenings, watching the reflections of the city lights ripple across the water. He wonders if they'd ever be able to repair what's left, or if this is the beginning of the end. She stays in the house, and it feels haunted without him. At work, whispers follow her. A few colleagues avert their eyes. Others stare too long, judgment sharp enough to cut. The divorced parent she was involved with avoids her completely, leaving her to face the consequences alone. But the worst judgment doesn't come from others. It comes from herself. Every morning she wakes with a weight crushing her chest, a reminder that she has wounded the one person she never meant to hurt. She reads Ethan's absence in every quiet room, every unwashed coffee mug, every night she spends alone on their couch. She sends messages she never sends. "I'm sorry, I wish I could go back. I miss you." But she doesn't hit send. Not yet. Not when she doesn't know if she has the right to ask for anything anymore. Two lives drifting apart, two hearts still tangled, and a marriage suspended in the space between regret and the faint hope of redemption. 3 weeks pass before Claire gathers the courage to ask him to meet. They choose a quiet cafe near the water, neutral ground, a place without memories. Ethan arrives early, his hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup he hasn't sipped from. When she walks in, he feels the air shift. She looks smaller somehow, as if carrying the weight of everything she's been hiding. Claire sits. For a moment, they just stare at each other, their silence thick, trembling. "I need to tell you the whole truth," she begins, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan doesn't reply. He simply nods, bracing himself. "It wasn't about him," she says, staring down at her hands. "It was about disappearing. Every day I felt myself becoming quieter, less noticeable. I'd talk, and I wasn't sure you heard me anymore. I didn't feel wanted or interesting or even seen." She swallows hard. He listened. That's all it started as. Someone who remembered small things about me, who made me feel alive again. But it wasn't love. It wasn't even real. Her voice cracks. "I didn't leave you for him. I left myself, and then I lost you both." Ethan's stomach tightens. He wants to be angry. He was angry, but now, listening to her, he feels something far more complicated. Because he remembers the nights he brushed her off, the conversations he half heard, the way he retreated into work, thinking stability was the same as love. "I never meant to hurt you," Claire finishes, tears streaming. "I just didn't know how to ask you to see me again." Ethan's hands shake and he sets his cup down before it spills. He exhales slowly. "I hear you," he says, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounds. "But I don't know what to do with all of this." Claire looks up, hope flickering and dying in her eyes all at once. "I'm not asking you to take me back," she says. "I'm asking you to understand why it happened." Ethan nods, jaw clenched. Empathy pulls him one way. Pain drags him the other. Forgiveness feels like a word too big, too heavy to hold right now. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he admits, "but I'm trying to understand, and that's something." Claire wipes her cheeks. "It is. It's enough for today." They sit together for a long time afterward. Not as husband and wife, not as enemies, but as two flawed people acknowledging the wreckage they created. It isn't reconciliation, it isn't closure, but it is a beginning, a step towards something, even if neither of them knows what that something will become. The last leaves of late autumn drift across the pavement as Ethan and Claire step out of the cafe. The sky above Seattle is pale and cold, almost translucent. They walk side by side without touching, their breaths rising in soft, separate clouds. There's no dramatic farewell, no passionate embrace, just the quiet understanding that their story, the version they once lived, has ended. Yet something new, fragile and undefined, lingers. They stop near the water, where the city lights shimmer across Lake Union. Claire pulls her coat tighter, her voice steadier now, though her eyes remain swollen. "I kept imagining this moment," she says. "I thought you'd hate me. I thought I'd hate myself enough to stay silent forever." "You're not silent now," Ethan replies, "and you're listening." She offers a faint smile. I never gave you enough credit for that. Ethan looks out across the lake. I'm sorry too, he says finally. Not for what you did, but for the way I let silence grow between us. I thought being stable was enough. I didn't realize I'd become a stranger in my own marriage. Claire's breath trembles. We both stopped reaching before the affair ever happened. That's the part that hurts the most. They stand in the wind, their truths finally laid bare, cleaner than the evidence, sharper than the betrayal. What happens now? Claire asks. Ethan doesn't rush his answer. He feels the weight of the past months settle and soften, as if some of it is finally dissolving. I think, he says slowly, healing may not lead us back to each other, and maybe that has to be okay. Claire nods, tears returning, not frantic, not desperate, but mournful and accepting. I want you to be happy, even if that isn't with me. You deserve happiness too, he replies. They both know it isn't a promise to reunite. It isn't a farewell to hope either. It's simply an acknowledgement that love alone cannot always rebuild what silence destroyed. They walk back toward their cars. Claire pauses, laying a hand briefly on Ethan's arm, a gentle, respectful touch. Thank you, she whispers, for letting me tell the truth, for not turning it into war. Ethan looks at her, not with anger or longing, but with a kind of quiet recognition. We owed each other honesty, he says, even at the end. Claire nods once, then steps back. He watches her drive away, her taillights glowing like two fading embers disappearing into the Seattle night. As Ethan gets into his car, he feels something surprising. Not relief, not grief, but space. A beginning, a chance to start over, alone or someday with someone else, without the bitterness that so often poisons endings. He knows healing won't be linear. He knows forgiveness will come in small, painful increments. But for the first time in a long time, the path ahead feels open. Claire drives home to face her own rebuilding, her own shame, her own courage, her own possibility of growth. Separate roads, shared lesson. They finally understand what silence costs, and what truth, even when late and heavy, can save. Here the story closes, unbroken, unresolved, but honest.